Ambassador Vorath of the Kelrani Dominion had served on the Galactic Council for 47 cycles. In all that time, he had never once seen anyone sit in Chair 7G. The chair itself was nothing special. It was made of the same dark metal as all the others, curved to fit most body types, positioned in the third row of the great circular chamber. A small holographic display floated above it, showing the designation in soft blue letters. Earth, Sol System. Species classification, pre-contact developing. Every session, Vorath found his eyes drawn to that empty chair. It bothered him in ways he could not explain. The Galactic Council had representatives from over 400 species. Some were ancient civilizations that had mastered the stars before Vorath's ancestors crawled from the oceans of Kelran. Others were newcomers, species that had achieved faster-than-light travel within the last few centuries and eagerly claimed their seats at the great table of galactic civilization. But Earth's chair remained empty. 300 cycles ago, the Council had sent an observation probe to the Sol system. The probe had found a blue planet teeming with life, dominated by a young species that called themselves humans. They were clever creatures, the probe reported. They had split the atom and walked on their moon. But they were also violent, divided into competing nations that seemed more interested in fighting each other than reaching for the stars. The Council had made its decision. Humans were not ready. They would be contacted when they matured, when they stopped their internal conflicts, when they proved themselves worthy of joining galactic civilization. Until then, their chair would wait. Vorath remembered thinking at the time that it was a reasonable decision. Now, watching the empty chair while his colleagues argued about trade disputes and border conflicts, he was not so sure. The motion to increase patrols along the Threll border has failed, announced the speaker, a crystalline being from a species whose name Vorath could never pronounce correctly. We will now hear the report from the Outer Rim Defense Committee. Vorath settled into his chair, preparing for another long and pointless debate. The Outer Rim was always having problems. Pirates, raiders, the occasional aggressive species that needed to be taught manners. Nothing that ever changed, nothing that ever got better. Then Admiral Kess of the Valorian Navy stepped to the central podium, and Vorath saw something he had never seen on the Admiral's face before. Fear. Distinguished members of the Council, Kess began, her voice steady despite the terror in her eyes. I must inform you of a situation that has developed over the past 30 cycles. A situation that threatens the existence of every civilization in this chamber. The chamber went quiet. Kess was not known for dramatic statements. She was a soldier, practical and direct. If she said something was a threat, it was a threat. The Veth hegemony has begun moving, Kess continued. Their fleet crossed into Council space 14 cycles ago. Since then, they have consumed 12 systems. Consumed, not conquered. The populations, the resources, the infrastructure, all of it is gone. We estimate their current fleet strength at over 3,000 warships, with more being built every day from the materials they harvest. Vorath felt his blood turn cold. The Veth were legends, nightmares told to frighten children, a species from the far reaches of the galaxy that existed only to consume. They had destroyed entire civilizations before the Council had even formed. Everyone had hoped they were extinct, or at least dormant. What are our options? Demanded Councillor Mirth of the Syndicate Worlds. Surely the combined fleets of the Council can... Our combined fleets number approximately 800 combat-capable vessels, Kess interrupted. The Veth have nearly 4 times that number, and their ships are different. They adapt. They learn. Every engagement makes them stronger. The chamber erupted into chaos. Representatives shouted over each other, demanding action, demanding explanations, demanding someone to blame. Vorath watched it all with a growing sense of despair. This was how the Council always responded to crisis. Argument, debate, delay. By the time they agreed on a course of action, how many more systems would fall? We must authorize emergency military powers, shouted one ambassador. That requires a 2/3 majority vote, which cannot be called without a 7-cycle notice period, responded another. Then suspend the rules. Suspending the rules requires unanimous consent, And I certainly do not. The lights went out. Every system in the chamber died at once. The holographic displays, the translation matrices, the environmental controls, the gravity generators. For one terrible moment, Vorath floated in absolute darkness, surrounded by the screams and cries of 400 panicking diplomats. Then the emergency lighting flickered on, casting the chamber in a dim red glow. And there was someone sitting in chair 7G. She was small by galactic standards, barely reaching the chest of most species in the room. Her skin was a warm brown color, her hair black and cut short. She wore a simple gray jumpsuit with no markings, no insignia, nothing to indicate who she was or where she came from. She sat in the empty chair as if she belonged there, as if she had always been there, watching the council argue while the galaxy burned. "I apologize for the dramatic entrance," she said. Her voice was calm, almost amused. "But you were all talking so loudly, and I really did need to get everyone's attention." Security forces were already moving toward her, weapons drawn. She did not seem concerned. "My name is Maya Chen," she continued. "I represent Earth, and I am here to inform the Galactic Council that the Veth situation has been resolved." Admiral Kess pushed through the crowd of diplomats. "What do you mean resolved?" "The Veth fleet was destroyed approximately 3 hours ago," Maya said. "Well, most of it. We left a few ships intact so they could carry our message back to their homeworld. We find it helps to have survivors. It makes the warning more believable." The chamber was silent. Vorath stared at the human woman, trying to understand what he was hearing. Humans were supposed to be primitives, still fighting among themselves on their little blue planet. Humans were not supposed to be here. Humans were certainly not supposed to be casually announcing that they had destroyed the greatest military threat the galaxy had seen in millennia. "That's impossible," Kess said. "The Veth fleet numbered over 3,000 ships. No force in the galaxy could—" "No force in the Council could," Maya corrected gently. "You're right about that. Your fleets are impressive, Admiral, but they're built for different things. Peacekeeping, border patrol, showing the flag. The Veth required a different approach." "And what approach was that?" Vorath heard himself ask. Maya turned to look at him. Her eyes were dark and deep, and Vorath had the sudden uncomfortable feeling that she was seeing far more than his physical form. "We killed them," she said simply. "Not all of them. We're not monsters. But enough to make our point. Enough to make them understand that expansion in this direction is no longer an option." Counselor Mirth stepped forward, his face twisted with outrage. "This is an act of war. Humans have no authority to conduct military operations in Council space. You have no treaty with us, no mutual defense agreement, no authorization of any kind." "That's correct," Maya agreed. "Then by what right do you—" "We didn't need a right," Maya said. "We saw a problem. We fixed it. That's what we do." The chamber erupted again, but this time Vorath barely heard the shouting. He was watching Maya Chen, watching her calm face and steady hands, watching the way she looked at the chaos around her with something that might have been patience or might have been pity. "How long?" he asked quietly. Maya looked at him again. "I'm sorry? How long have humans been capable of this? How long have you been out here, watching us, while we thought you were still primitives playing with nuclear weapons on a single planet?" Maya smiled. It was not a cruel smile, but it was not entirely kind either. It was the smile of someone who had been keeping a secret for a very long time and was finally allowed to tell it. "About 200 years, she said, give or take." 200 years, Vorath repeated. "And in all that time, you never announced yourselves, never asked for your seat on the council. Never—" "Never needed to," Maya finished. "That's the thing, Ambassador. We never needed your permission. We never asked for that seat." She gestured at the chair beneath her. "You just assumed we wanted it." Vorath looked at the human woman, at the empty chair that was no longer empty, at the shocked and frightened faces of his fellow council members. He thought about 200 years of human silence, 200 years of humans watching and waiting while the council debated and delayed and let problems fester until they became catastrophes. "What do you want?" he asked. Maya stood up from the chair. She was so small, Vorath thought, so fragile looking, and yet she had just announced the destruction of the most powerful military force in the galaxy as casually as if she were discussing the weather. "We want to have a conversation," she said. "A real one. Not about treaties or trade agreements or voting rights. A conversation about what kind of galaxy we all want to live in." She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of every representative she could see. "We've been your neighbors for 200 years. We've watched you struggle. We've helped where we could, quietly, without asking for credit. But the Veth changed things. They forced our hand. So here we are." She walked toward the exit, then paused and looked back. "You have questions, I understand. We'll answer all of them in time. But first, I suggest you take a few hours to absorb what you've learned today. Talk among yourselves. Argue, debate, do whatever you need to do. When you're ready to have a real conversation, we'll be waiting." She was almost to the door when Admiral Kess called out, "Wait, how many of you are there? How many humans are in council space?" Maya paused. When she spoke, her voice was quiet, but in the silent chamber, everyone heard her clearly. "At last count, about 4 billion, give or take." Then she was gone, and Vorath was left staring at the empty doorway, wondering how the universe had changed so completely in the span of a single hour. The council chamber had been emptied of most representatives. Only a small group remained: the heads of the major factions, the senior admirals, and Ambassador Vorath, who had refused to leave until he understood what was happening. Maya Chen sat in a simple chair in the center of the room. She had accepted water and politely declined food, explaining that human digestion was sensitive to unfamiliar proteins. She seemed perfectly comfortable being surrounded by beings who were larger, stronger, and more numerous than her. She seemed perfectly comfortable with everything. "You said 200 years, Vorath began, but our probe visited your world 300 cycles ago. Your people were still using chemical rockets. You had not even established permanent colonies on your own moon." "Your probe was very thorough," Maya agreed. "It cataloged our technology, our population distribution, our political structures. It concluded that we were approximately 2 centuries away from achieving faster-than-light travel, and that our internal conflicts made us unsuitable for contact." She paused. "We found the probe's report quite educational. It taught us exactly what you were looking for, and what you were not." Admiral Kess leaned forward. "Are you saying you deceived our probe?" "We showed your probe what it expected to see," Maya said. "An aggressive, primitive species, too busy fighting itself to look at the stars. It was not entirely false. We were fighting, and we were primitive by your standards. But we were also watching, learning, preparing." "Preparing for what?" Counselor Mirth demanded. Maya's expression grew thoughtful. "Have you ever heard the humans saying, 'Better to ask forgiveness than permission'?" Silence. "We monitored your probe. We traced its signal back to its origin. We learned that there was a galaxy full of civilizations out there, and that those civilizations had rules about who could join them and when. We learned that those rules were designed by species who had been in space for thousands of years. Species who controlled the resources and the technology and the trade routes." Maya smiled faintly. "We learned that if we followed your rules, we would be children at a table of adults, begging for scraps while others decided our fate. So you chose to break the rules," Vorath said. "We chose to ignore them. There is a difference." Maya stood and began to pace slowly around the room. "50 years after your probe visited us, we achieved faster-than-light travel. Our first ships were crude, barely functional, dangerous to their crews. But they worked, and suddenly the galaxy was open to us." "Why did you not announce yourselves?" Kess asked. "You would have been welcome. The Council celebrates new species." "The Council categorizes new species," Maya corrected, "assigns them roles, determines their value. We watched how that process worked. We saw young civilizations forced to choose sides in conflicts they did not understand. We saw promising species exploited for their resources or their labor. We saw the Council debate for years about whether to help worlds that were dying, while everyone argued about jurisdiction and precedent." Her voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath it. "We decided we did not want to be categorized. We did not want to be assigned a role. We wanted to make our own choices." She stopped pacing and faced the gathered leaders. "So we came to the galaxy quietly. We learned your languages, your customs, your technologies. We modified our appearance when necessary. Genetic engineering is not difficult once you understand the principles. We forged documents, created identities, built networks, and then we went to work. Vorath felt a chill run down his spine. To work doing what? Maya's answer came in the form of stories. She told them about the Meridian Station collapse 40 years ago. A massive space station in the Outer Rim had suffered a catastrophic structural failure. The Council had dispatched rescue ships, but they were weeks away. By the time they arrived, 20,000 people would be dead. Except a team of engineers had appeared from nowhere. People who spoke with strange accents and used unfamiliar tools. They had worked for 3 days straight, reinforcing the failing structure, rerouting power, holding the station together through sheer determination. When the Council ships finally arrived, the station was stable and the population was alive. The engineers had vanished, leaving no names, no records, no explanation. Those were humans, Maya said. We had people on that station. When it started failing, we brought in specialists. We saved the station because our people were on it, and because saving people is what we do. She told them about the Threll Plague, 60 years ago. A mysterious illness had swept through the Threll Federation, killing millions. The Council's medical teams had been overwhelmed, unable to find a cure. Then a doctor had arrived on the worst-hit world, a doctor with no credentials and no explanation, carrying a treatment that worked. The plague had ended. The doctor had disappeared. Maya said, Dr. Amara Okonkwo, she spent 8 years studying Threll biology before the plague hit. When it started spreading, she synthesized a cure in 3 days. She saved 11 million lives and never asked for anything in return. She told them about the Valorian Civil War, 90 years ago. 2 factions had been fighting for control of the Valorian homeworld, and the conflict had threatened to destabilize the entire sector. Both sides had been evenly matched. Both sides had been equally ruthless, and the Council had been unable to intervene without appearing to take sides. Then the leader of one faction had died, assassinated, the official report said, though the assassin was never found. The remaining leadership had fragmented, the war had ended, and the Valorian people had rebuilt their world in peace. Admiral Kess went pale. Are you claiming that humans... I am saying that the Valorian Civil War ended when it needed to end, Maya said carefully. I am saying that sometimes problems have solutions that polite societies do not like to discuss. I am saying that humans have been solving problems in this galaxy for 200 years, and we have not always used methods that would be approved by this council. The room was silent. Vorath looked around at his colleagues and saw the same expression on every face, a mixture of horror, disbelief, and dawning understanding. How many, Counselor Mirth whispered, how many of these interventions have there been? Maya considered the question. I do not have an exact number. Our operations are decentralized by design. No single person knows everything we do, but over 2 centuries across a galaxy of 400 civilizations, she shrugged, thousands, perhaps tens of thousands. We have been very busy. This is impossible, Kess said. 4 billion humans operating in our space for 200 years, and we never noticed? You noticed, Maya said. You noticed when stations were saved and plagues were cured and wars were ended. You just never asked where the help came from. You assumed it was luck or coincidence or the work of anonymous benefactors who wanted nothing in return. She smiled. We were happy to let you believe that. It made our work easier. Vorath stood slowly. His legs felt weak, his mind overwhelmed. He had spent his entire career believing that the Galactic Council was the center of civilization, the place where the important decisions were made, the institution that held the galaxy together. Now he was learning that the galaxy had been held together by someone else entirely. Why tell us now, he asked. You could have continued as you were. We would never have known. Why reveal yourselves? Maya's expression grew serious. Because the Veth changed everything. We have been content to work in the shadows, to help without asking for recognition. But the Veth were a threat we could not handle quietly. Destroying their fleet required resources, coordination, visibility. We could not pretend to be anonymous benefactors when we were deploying a battle fleet. You could have let us handle the Veth, Kess said, though her voice lacked conviction. Could we? Maya asked gently. I watched your council debate for 2 hours before I interrupted. In that time, you failed to agree on a single course of action. The Veth were 12 systems into your territory, and you were still arguing about procedure. She shook her head. We could not let you handle the Veth. Too many people would have died while you decided what to do. Voreth wanted to argue. He wanted to defend the council, to insist that they would have risen to the challenge, that the procedures existed for good reasons. But the words would not come, because deep down in the part of himself he rarely acknowledged, he knew she was right. What happens now? He asked instead. Maya walked to the window. Outside, the great expanse of space stretched to infinity, filled with stars and civilizations and problems that would never end. Now we talk, she said. Really talk, not as supplicants asking for a seat at your table, but as equals, as partners. She turned back to face them. We do not want to rule this galaxy. We do not want to replace your council or tear down your institutions. We just want to help. We have always wanted to help, but we cannot do that from the shadows anymore. The Veth made sure of that. And if we refuse, Mirth asked, if we demand that you submit to council authority, follow our rules, accept our oversight? Maya did not answer immediately. When she spoke, her voice was soft, but carried clearly through the silent chamber. Ambassador, there are 4 billion humans in this galaxy. We are in your governments, your militaries, your corporations, your universities. We have been part of your societies for 200 years. We have friends everywhere. People who know us, trust us, rely on us. She paused. If you try to remove us, you will tear your civilization apart. And even then, you would fail. We are very good at hiding. The threat was clear, but somehow it did not feel like a threat. It felt like a statement of fact, delivered without malice or pride. We would rather be your friends, Maya continued. We would rather work alongside you openly, helping to solve the problems that face us all. But that is your choice, not ours. We have made our choice already. We chose this galaxy as our home, and we intend to take care of it. She smiled again, and this time the smile reached her eyes. Whether you give us permission or not. Voreth looked at the human woman, so small and fragile-looking, and understood that he was witnessing the birth of a new era. The galaxy would never be the same. The only question was whether that change would be peaceful or violent, cooperative or hostile. Looking at Maya Chen, at the quiet confidence in her eyes, Voreth found himself hoping, praying almost, that the council would make the right choice. Because he was beginning to suspect that the humans had been making the right choices for a very long time. Commander Kreth of the Veth hegemony had conquered 37 worlds in his career. He had watched civilizations burn, had tasted the fear of species that knew they were about to become food for the endless hunger of his people. He had never known defeat. He had never known fear. He knew both now. 12 hours before Maya Chen walked into the Galactic Council chamber, Kreth had been standing on the bridge of his dreadnought, the Eternal Hunger, watching his fleet approach the Marana system. It was a small system, barely worth noting. A single inhabited world, mostly agricultural, with no military presence and no strategic value. The perfect target. The Veth did not conquer for glory or territory. They consumed. Every world they took was stripped of resources, its population processed, its infrastructure dismantled and absorbed into the ever-growing fleet. The Veth hegemony was not an empire in any traditional sense. It was a hunger-given form, a species that had evolved to consume everything in its path and move on to the next meal. Kreth had been born hungry. He would die hungry. It was the Veth way. Commander, his tactical officer reported, we are detecting an anomaly at the system's edge. A single vessel, unknown configuration. Kreth barely glanced at the display. Identify it. Unable to identify. The design does not match any known species in our database. It is small, approximately frigate class. No visible weapon systems, no shields detected. A scout, then, or a civilian vessel that wandered into the wrong place at the wrong time. Kreth waved a clawed hand dismissively. Destroy it and continue to the planet. The fleet moved forward. 300 warships, each one bristling with weapons designed to tear through any defense. piloted by crews that had never known mercy or hesitation. The single unknown vessel did not flee. It simply waited. Then it began to broadcast. Attention, Veth Fleet. This system is under human protection. Turn back now and you will not be harmed. Continue forward and you will be destroyed. This is your only warning. Kreth laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. Veth laughter rarely was. Human? What is human? Tactical? Search the database. Searching. No results found. The species designation human does not appear in any known records. Then they are nothing, a primitive species attempting to frighten us with bold words. Kreth settled into his command chair. Continue forward. Destroy the vessel and anyone aboard it. The fleet accelerated. The unknown vessel remained stationary. At optimal firing range, the lead ships of the Veth fleet opened fire. Plasma cannons, particle beams, missile batteries, enough firepower to crack a small moon. The energy lit up the void, converging on the tiny ship that dared to stand in their way. The tiny ship was not there. Kreth blinked. One moment the vessel had been directly ahead, centered in his tactical display. The next moment it was gone, not destroyed. The sensors showed no debris, no energy release. Simply gone. Where is it? He demanded. Scanning. Contact reacquired. It is. Commander, it is behind us. Kreth spun. The main view screen showed the impossible. The unknown vessel was now positioned at the rear of the fleet, as if it had simply stepped from one location to another. That is not possible. No drive system can... The universe exploded. Kreth would later struggle to describe what happened next. It was not a battle in any sense he understood. Battles involved two sides fighting, exchanging fire, maneuvering for advantage. This was not that. This was execution. Ships appeared from nowhere. Hundreds of them, emerging from some kind of concealment that the Veth sensors could not penetrate. They were small compared to Veth dreadnoughts, sleek and angular, painted in blacks and grays that seemed to absorb light itself. And they moved like nothing Kreth had ever seen. The Veth fleet opened fire. They were warriors after all, trained to fight against any odds. Plasma bursts and particle beams filled the void, enough firepower to devastate a dozen worlds. The human ships danced through it like water flowing around stones. They did not dodge in the conventional sense. They seemed to know where the Veth weapons would be before they fired, sliding sideways or up or down just enough to let the deadly energy pass harmlessly by. And as they danced, they returned fire. The human weapons were precise beyond anything Kreth had ever encountered. They did not spray destruction indiscriminately. Each shot was targeted, surgical, designed to disable rather than destroy. Power conduits were severed. Engine cores were punctured. Weapon systems were melted into slag. One by one, the ships of the Veth fleet went dark. Commander, the tactical officer's voice was high with panic. We have lost contact with the Devourer and the Endless Maw. The consuming fire reports complete engine failure. The bridge shook as something struck the eternal hunger. Kreth grabbed his chair to keep from falling, his claws digging into the metal. Report! Direct hit to the primary reactor. We are losing power. Shields are failing. Commander, we must... Another impact, and the lights died. Kreth floated in darkness, listening to the screams of his crew and the groaning of his dying ship. The pride of the Veth hegemony, the terror of a dozen species, reduced to a floating coffin in less than 4 minutes. Then the emergency lights came on, and Kreth saw that he was not alone. She stood in the center of the bridge, a creature unlike anything in his experience. Soft skin, no claws, no armor, no visible weapons, small enough that he could have killed her with one hand. She looked at him with eyes that held no fear, no hatred, no satisfaction. She looked at him with something that might have been pity. Commander Kreth, she said. Her voice was calm, almost gentle. My name is Captain Elena Vasquez of the Human Defense Fleet. Your invasion of Council space ends today. Kreth tried to move, to attack, to do something. His body would not respond. Looking down, he saw the small device attached to his chest, blinking softly. Some kind of paralytic, he realized. He had been disabled before he even knew she was there. Your fleet has been neutralized, Captain Vasquez continued. Approximately 90% of your vessels have been disabled. The remainder are being allowed to retreat so they can carry our message back to your homeworld. You cannot. Kreth forced the words through paralyzed lips. The hegemony will not. The hegemony will do exactly what we tell them to do, Vasquez said. There was no boast in her voice, no pride. She was stating a fact. We have been watching your species for a long time, Commander. We know your fleet strength, your industrial capacity, your expansion patterns. We know the location of every Veth colony, every shipyard, every resource depot. She stepped closer, and Kreth saw something terrifying in her eyes. Not cruelty, understanding. We know that your species consumes because you believe you have no choice. Your biology drives you to expand, to devour, to grow. You look at the galaxy and see only food because that is how evolution shaped you. She paused. We also know that you are intelligent enough to change, to find another way. There is no other way, Kreth snarled. We are Veth. We consume. That is our nature. Your nature can be adapted. Your hunger can be channeled into something that does not require the destruction of everything you encounter. Vasquez pulled a small device from her pocket and held it up. This is a biological modifier. It was designed specifically for Veth physiology. It will not change who you are. It will not make you weak. It will simply expand your options, allow you to find satisfaction in things other than conquest. Kreth stared at the device with horror. You would change us? Make us into something we are not? We would give you a choice, Vasquez corrected. Right now, your biology allows only one path: consume or die. We are offering you a second path: coexist, build, create. She smiled faintly. You would be surprised how satisfying creation can be once you experience it. And if we refuse, Vasquez's smile faded, then we will stop you. Every time you try to expand, we will be there. Every fleet you send, we will destroy. Every world you target, we will protect. We do not want to exterminate your species, Commander. We find the idea repulsive, but we will not allow you to consume innocent civilizations simply because you are hungry. She turned and walked toward the shattered viewport, where the debris of the Veth fleet drifted silently through space. Your hegemony has a choice to make, she said. You can continue as you have been, and we will fight you forever. Or you can try something new. Learn to be neighbors instead of predators. Find ways to satisfy your hunger that do not require the death of millions. She looked back at him, and Kreth saw something unexpected in her expression: hope. We believe you can do it, she said. Humans were predators once too. Killers, conquerors, destroyers. We changed. We found better ways. It took us a long time, and we made many mistakes, but we learned. She paused. We would like to help you learn too, if you will let us. Kreth wanted to refuse. Every instinct screamed at him to reject her offer, to promise vengeance, to swear that the hegemony would never submit to these soft, weak creatures who dared to lecture him about change. But he had watched his fleet die in 4 minutes. He had seen weapons that his people could not counter, technology that his scientists could not explain, tactics that his warriors could not match. And he had seen the look in Captain Vasquez's eyes, not the look of a conqueror savoring victory, the look of someone who genuinely wanted to help. What happens now? He asked. Vasquez nodded, as if he had passed some kind of test. Now we let you go. You return to your homeworld and tell your leaders what happened here. Tell them about our offer. Tell them they have 1 cycle to respond. And if they refuse, then we will be very sad, Vasquez said, and then we will do what needs to be done. She pressed something on the device attached to his chest, and feeling began to return to Kreth's limbs. But I do not think they will refuse. Not once they hear your report. Not once they understand what they are facing. She walked toward the airlock, where a human shuttle waited to take her back to her own ship. What are you? Kreth called after her. What kind of species defeats a fleet of 300 ships in 4 minutes and then offers mercy to the survivors? Vasquez paused at the door. When she turned back, her expression was complicated, proud and sad and hopeful all at once. "We are humans," she said. "We are your neighbors, and we would very much like to be your friends, if you will let us." Then she was gone, and Kreth was left alone on his ruined bridge, surrounded by the wreckage of everything he had believed about the universe. The Veth had thought themselves the ultimate predators. They had been wrong. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been going on for 6 hours. Ambassador Vorth had lost count of how many times the same arguments had been repeated, the same objections raised, the same fears expressed in slightly different words. The chamber was divided, and the division was ugly. On one side stood those who saw humanity's revelation as an opportunity. These were mostly the smaller powers, the species that had long been frustrated by the Council's slow response to crises, the civilizations that had suffered while bureaucrats debated. They looked at Maya Chen and saw hope, a force that actually got things done, that protected the weak without waiting for permission. On the other side stood those who saw humanity as a threat. These were the established powers, the species that had built the current order and benefited from its structures. They looked at Maya Chen and saw chaos, a rogue element that operated outside the rules, that answered to no authority, that could apparently destroy a fleet of 300 warships whenever it felt like it. Counselor Mirth was leading the opposition, his voice rising with each new argument. "They admit to operating illegally in our space for 200 years. They admit to interfering in our internal affairs, influencing our wars, manipulating our politics. How can we possibly trust them? How can we possibly stop them?" responded Ambassador Kell of the Syndicate Worlds, one of the smaller powers. "You heard what they said. 4 billion humans spread throughout the galaxy, integrated into every society. Even if we wanted to remove them, we could not. So we simply accept their presence, allow them to continue operating without oversight, without accountability, without any check on their power?" "What power have they abused?" Kell demanded. "Name one instance where humans used their hidden influence for evil. Name one time they conquered a world, exploited a population, enriched themselves at others' expense." Mirth sputtered. "That is not the point. The point is that they could do those things. They have the capability." "So does the Kelrani Dominion," Vorath said quietly. The chamber went silent. Everyone turned to look at him. Vorath rose from his seat. He was tired, his mind still struggling to process everything he had learned in the past day. But he knew he had to speak. "The Kelrani Dominion has one of the largest fleets in Council space," he said. "We have the capability to conquer dozens of worlds, to subjugate weaker species, to build an empire through force. We do not do these things because we have chosen not to. Because we believe cooperation is better than conquest, trade is better than theft, alliance is better than subjugation." He turned to face the assembly. "Humans have had the capability to dominate this galaxy for 2 centuries. They chose not to. Instead, they chose to help. Quietly, anonymously, without seeking credit or reward. They saved stations and cured plagues and ended wars, and they never once asked for anything in return." "Pretty words," Mirth sneered, "but actions speak louder, and their actions include unauthorized military operations, covert interference in sovereign affairs, and the destruction of an entire fleet without council sanction." "The destruction of a fleet that was consuming our world," Vorath countered. "The destruction of a fleet that we could not stop ourselves." "I watched this council argue for 2 hours about procedure, while the Veth burned 12 systems. If the humans had not intervened, how many more would have died before we agreed on a response?" The question hung in the air. No one answered, because everyone knew the truth. The council was slow. It had always been slow. That slowness had cost lives, millions of lives over the centuries. Maya Chen had been sitting quietly throughout the debate. Now she stood, and the chamber fell silent. "I understand your concerns," she said. "I truly do. You have built something remarkable here, a coalition of hundreds of species, maintaining peace across a galaxy. It is not perfect, but it is real. And now strangers have appeared, strangers who have been operating outside your system, and you wonder if we are a threat to everything you have built." She walked to the center of the chamber, standing in the open space where speakers traditionally address the council. Let me tell you a story, she said. A story about humans. 300 years ago, our world was divided into nations that spent most of their energy fighting each other. We had weapons that could destroy cities in an instant, and we came very close to using them. We were everything your probe said we were. Violent, divided, self-destructive. Then we discovered we were not alone. Your probe showed us that there were civilizations among the stars, civilizations that had achieved things we could barely imagine. And we realized that if we kept fighting among ourselves, we would never reach those stars. We would destroy ourselves before we ever had the chance. So we changed. It was not easy. It took generations. There were setbacks, conflicts, moments when we thought we might fail, but we kept trying because we had seen what was possible. We had seen the galaxy that waited for us, if only we could grow up enough to claim our place in it. She paused, looking around the chamber at the assembled representatives. When we finally achieved faster-than-light travel, we faced a choice. We could announce ourselves, ask for our seat at your table, submit to your rules and your judgments, or we could do things our own way. We chose the second option, not because we thought we were better than you, but because we had learned something important about ourselves. We learned that humans work best when they have a purpose, when they have something to build, someone to help, a problem to solve. We knew that if we joined your council, we would spend our time arguing about procedure while people suffered. So we decided to skip the arguments and go straight to the helping. Maya smiled faintly. Were we arrogant? Probably. Did we make mistakes? Certainly. But I truly believe, that we did more good operating in the shadows than we ever could have done sitting in that empty chair, voting on resolutions that would be ignored by anyone who found them inconvenient. Counselor Mirth stepped forward. And now that you have revealed yourselves, now that you have destroyed the Veth fleet and announced your presence to the galaxy, what do you want? What we have always wanted, Maya said. To help, to build, to make the galaxy a little bit better than it was before. And if we oppose you, Maya's expression grew sad, then we will continue anyway. We will not fight you. That would defeat the purpose of everything we have worked for. But we will not stop helping people who need help, protecting people who need protection, solving problems that need to be solved. We never needed your permission before. We do not need it now. That is the problem, Mirth exploded. You operate without oversight, without accountability. Who decides which problems you solve? Who decides which people you help? What happens when your judgment is wrong? We make mistakes, Maya admitted. We are not perfect, no one is. But our mistakes are made with good intentions, and we try to learn from them. Can you say the same about this council? How many times has this body failed to act when action was needed? How many times has procedure been used as an excuse to do nothing while innocents suffered? The question was a blow, and everyone felt it. The council's failures were well documented. Disasters that could have been prevented, crises that could have been addressed, suffering that could have been stopped. Everyone in the chamber had blood on their hands, whether they admitted it or not. Vorath spoke again. Perhaps the question is not whether we should accept humanity's presence. They are here regardless of what we decide. The question is how we move forward, how we build a relationship that serves everyone. Maya nodded. That is exactly right. We are not asking you to give up your authority. We are not asking you to disband the council or abandon your institutions. We are asking you to accept that the galaxy is bigger than any one system of governance, and that there is room for different approaches. We will continue to operate independently. That is not negotiable. Our effectiveness depends on our ability to act quickly, without waiting for approval from committees. But we are willing to coordinate with you, to share information, to work alongside your forces when our goals align. We can be partners if you will let us. Admiral Kess had been silent throughout the debate. Now she spoke, her voice thoughtful. What about the Veth? You said you offered them a choice, cooperation or continued conflict. What if they choose conflict? Then we will defeat them, Maya said simply, as many times as necessary, but I do not think it will come to that. Why not? Because the Veth are intelligent. They consume because their biology drives them to consume. But they are capable of reason, of planning, of understanding long-term consequences. When they realize that expansion is no longer possible, they will adapt. They will find other ways to satisfy their hunger. It may take time, but they will change. You seem very confident, Kess observed. I have studied their species for decades, Maya replied. I know them better than they know themselves. And I believe in their potential, just as I believe in the potential of every species in this chamber. She paused. That is what humans do. We believe in potential. We see what others could become, and we try to help them get there. The chamber was quiet for a long moment. Then Ambassador Vorath spoke once more. I move that this council formally recognize humanity's presence in galactic space, he said, not as members of this body, but as partners, independent actors who share our goal of a peaceful and prosperous galaxy. That is unprecedented, Mirth protested. There is no category for such a relationship. Then we create one, Vorath said. That is what institutions do. They evolve to meet new circumstances. Humanity is a new circumstance. We can either adapt to their presence or pretend they do not exist. I know which option seems wiser to me. The vote was called. It was not unanimous. Nothing in the council ever was. But when the final tally was announced, the motion had passed. Humanity was officially recognized as a presence in the galaxy. Not a member of the council, not a subject of its laws, but something new, something that had never existed before. Maya Chen smiled as the result was announced. It was not the smile of victory, but the smile of someone who had taken a small step on a very long journey. Thank you, she said simply. This is a beginning. I hope it will be the beginning of something wonderful. Then she walked out of the chamber, leaving the council to contemplate what they had just done. Behind her, Earth's chair remained empty. It would always remain empty, and somehow that seemed exactly right. 6 months had passed since humanity revealed itself to the galaxy. On the Veth homeworld, a place that had once been nothing but factories and shipyards dedicated to building weapons of conquest, something remarkable was happening. Commander Kreth stood in the middle of what had once been a military training ground. Where young Veth had once learned to kill, they now learned to build. Human instructors moved among the students, patient and encouraging, teaching skills that the Veth had never needed before. Architecture, agriculture, art. It had not been easy. The biological modifier that Captain Vasquez had offered had worked exactly as promised. It did not change Veth nature, but it expanded their options. Where once they had known only the satisfaction of consumption, they could now experience other pleasures. The pleasure of creation, the pleasure of completion, the pleasure of seeing something grow rather than watching it die. Some Veth had rejected the modifier. They clung to the old ways, insisted that their species was meant to be predators, not builders. Kreth understood their resistance. He had felt it himself in the early days. The modifier felt like a chain, a limitation on what he was meant to be. Then he had built his first structure, a simple shelter, nothing impressive by galactic standards. But when he stepped back and looked at what his claws had created rather than destroyed, he had felt something he had never felt before. Pride, not the pride of conquest, the pride that came from taking what others had made. Real pride, the pride of creation. He was watching a young Veth struggle with a construction technique when a shadow fell across the training ground. Kreth looked up to see a human woman approaching, not Captain Vasquez, but one of the many human teachers who had volunteered to help with what they called the transition. Commander Kreth, she said, her pronunciation of his name almost perfect after months of practice. There is someone who wishes to speak with you, a representative from the council. Kreth felt his muscles tense, an old instinct that was slowly fading. The council? What do they want? They want to offer the Veth hegemony a trade agreement, the human said. She smiled at his obvious surprise. Apparently, the things your people are learning to make have attracted attention. Several species are interested in Veth craftsmanship. Kreth looked at the training ground, at the structures his people were building, at the gardens they were learning to cultivate. Trade, commerce, exchange without violence, profit without death. Tell them I will meet with their representative, he said, this afternoon, if they are available. The human nodded and walked away. Kreth watched her go, thinking about how strange the universe had become. 6 months ago, he would have killed her without hesitation, consumed her ship and her crew, and never thought twice about it. Now she was teaching his children to build. Across the galaxy, on the Council Station, Ambassador Vorath was experiencing his own strange transformation. The Council chamber still functioned as it always had. Representatives still argued about trade disputes and border conflicts and resource allocation, but something had changed in the way they argued. Decisions came faster. Excuses were harder to make. And in the corner, observing every session, sat a human representative. Maya Chen did not vote. She did not make motions or propose legislation. She simply watched and occasionally asked questions that cut through the rhetoric to the heart of whatever issue was being debated. Ambassador Mirth, she had said just last week, when the counselor was arguing against emergency aid to a flood-stricken world, your species controls 3 agricultural planets that produce more food than you can consume. The affected world needs supplies that would cost you nothing meaningful to provide. Why are you arguing against helping them? Mirth had sputtered something about proper procedures and precedent, and Maya had simply looked at him with those calm, dark eyes until he fell silent. The aid had been approved within the hour. Vorth was not sure if humanity's presence was good for the Council or bad for it. The institution was certainly more efficient now, more responsive, more willing to act when action was needed. But it was also more uncomfortable. Maya's questions forced representatives to confront the gap between their rhetoric and their actions, and that confrontation was rarely pleasant. Perhaps, Vorth thought, a little discomfort was a fair price for lives saved. Throughout the galaxy, similar stories were unfolding. On a space station in the Outer Rim, an engineer named David Park finally told his colleagues the truth about himself. He was human, he explained. He had been working among them for 20 years, fixing their systems, improving their efficiency, making their lives better in 100 small ways. They had known him as a Threll, thanks to genetic modifications that had given him the appearance of their species. His colleagues had stared at him in shock. Then the station commander, a gruff old Threll named Torvin, had laughed and slapped him on the back hard enough to bruise. 20 years, Torvin had said, and you still cannot hold your liquor. Some human you are. They had shared drinks that night, and David had told them stories about Earth, about blue oceans and green forests, about cities that touch the clouds and deserts that stretch to the horizon. His colleagues had listened with wonder, and when dawn came, nothing had really changed. David was still their friend. He was still their engineer. He just happened to be human, and that was fine. On a plague-stricken world in the Kelrani sector, Dr. Amara Okonkwo had finally returned. She was old now, her hair white and her hands no longer as steady as they once were. But the people of that world remembered her. They had built a statue in her honor, commemorating the mysterious doctor who had arrived from nowhere and saved 11 million lives. She stood before that statue now, surrounded by the descendants of people she had saved, and she wept. Not from sadness, but from joy. This was why she had spent her life in service to others. This was why she had given up everything, a career on Earth, a family, a normal life, to travel the stars and help whoever needed her. "Thank you," whispered an old woman who had been a child during the plague. "I never got to thank you before." Amara took the woman's hands in hers. "You thank me every day," she said. "Every day you lived, every child you raised, every moment of happiness you experienced. That was my thanks. That was all I ever wanted." On Earth itself, a ceremony was taking place. The Human Defense Fleet was being officially acknowledged for the first time. Thousands of ships, crewed by millions of personnel, emerged from concealment and took position in orbit around humanity's homeworld. It was a display of strength that would have terrified any observer. Enough firepower to challenge any force in the galaxy. But it was not meant as a threat. It was meant as an introduction. Admiral James Okonkwo, Amara's grandson, who had inherited her spirit of service, addressed the gathered crews via holographic broadcast. "For 200 years," he said, "we have served in secret. We have protected the innocent, punished the guilty, and asked for nothing in return. Today, we step into the light, not to conquer, not to dominate, but to continue the work our ancestors began. We are the shield that protects those who cannot protect themselves. We are the hand that reaches out to those in need. We are humanity, and we are proud of what we have built. The crews cheered. Across the galaxy, humans who had lived in hiding for their entire lives looked up at the stars and felt something they had never felt before. They were home wherever they happened to be. In the grand chamber of the Galactic Council, Maya Chen stood before the assembled representatives one final time. She had been invited to deliver an address marking the 6-month anniversary of humanity's revelation. When I first walked into this chamber, she said, I was a stranger, an intruder, someone who had violated your laws and challenged your assumptions. Many of you wanted me removed, arrested, punished for my people's crimes. She smiled. I do not blame you. We appeared from nowhere, announced that we had been manipulating your civilization for centuries, and then demanded that you accept our presence. It was not a gentle introduction. But something remarkable has happened in these 6 months. We have learned from each other. We have found ways to work together that neither of us could have imagined. The Veth are learning to build. The Council is learning to act. And humans are learning that we do not have to carry the galaxy's burdens alone. She paused, looking around the chamber at the faces of beings she had come to know. Some as friends, some as reluctant allies, all as neighbors. My people have a saying, no man is an island. It means that we cannot exist in isolation, that we need each other to survive and thrive. For 200 years, humanity has been helping this galaxy from the shadows. But shadows are lonely places, and we were not meant to be alone. Today, I want to make a promise. Humanity will continue to help wherever help is needed. We will continue to protect the innocent and oppose the tyrannical. We will continue to solve problems and build bridges and plant seeds of hope in the darkest corners of the galaxy. But we will not do it alone anymore. We will do it with you, as partners, as neighbors, as friends. She turned to look at the empty chair, Earth's chair, which had sat vacant for 300 years. That chair will remain empty, she said, not because we reject the Council, but because we have learned that our place is not at tables where decisions are made. Our place is in the spaces between, where decisions become action. We do not need a seat at your table. We need room to work. She smiled one last time. Thank you for giving us that room. Thank you for trusting us, even when trust was difficult. And thank you for teaching us something we had forgotten, that the galaxy is not a problem to be solved, but a community to be built. Maya stepped back from the podium. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then Ambassador Voreth began to clap. The sound was strange. Kelrani hands were not designed for applause, but the meaning was clear. Others joined him, the sound growing until the entire chamber rang with it. Maya Chen bowed her head in acknowledgement and walked out of the chamber. There was work to be done, as there was always work to be done. But for the first time in 200 years, she did not have to do it alone. Behind her, the empty chair remained, a reminder and a promise. Humans had never needed permission to help. They had never needed a seat at the table to make a difference. They had simply shown up, rolled up their sleeves, and gotten to work. And the galaxy was better for it. Across the stars, in 1,000 different languages, people shared a new saying. When trouble comes, look for the humans. They were probably already there. They always had been. They always would be.